and it'll be for flood storage mitigation. So that when there's a flood, the water will be held in. And the way it's designed, going up like this, the large objects which all came down, like the propane tanks and oil tanks and all of that, should come up at Melrose and stay there as the water recedes. So it'll be a storage area for all that really toxic stuff that came down. So we're talking tomorrow. It's still at $3.2 million. Our match is $625,000. And we're now in a deep press to get our match. So, but it's great. All of a sudden, it's falling out of the sky. Here it comes. So,
Something has taken a long time to happen.
Yeah, it's been. Oh, you'll love this. The terms and conditions that we're going to go over tomorrow. It says. And the work will be completed by August 30th, 2019.
Nice.
They better get going then.
Way to hold on to it.
I read that and I went, oh, you're kidding me. And Jack just cracked up. And we said, well, that just shows you how long. I mean, that was written in 2016. So they've given us 3 years to complete the work.
So you're
You
adding
better get on it.
Yeah. And finally, Red Clover 2.
Red Clover 2, we have made the town has made a community development application for us. We are going to the Vermont Housing Conservation Board in June, and we will get our state funding. They're going to recommend we get our state funding. We will then go in September for our federal funding. And the reason that had to get separated like that is because we've had the change in the financial management, and they wanted to just have some more, they wanted to give us more time to really produce the kinds of records that they want to see. It also will enable us to get this audit completed. We did have our FDS, which is the translation of real accounting into some HUD thing. That's been done. But that doesn't help them at all. But it does help us because it means accountants have come in and looked at the books and the records, and Carol and Mary have a much better sense of what that all looks like. We will get it looks like we'll get our accountants in July, and we'll press them to get their audit to us much sooner so that the federal staff at the HCB can get our audit prior to their September meeting.
Good.
But I don't. They're very favorable. They really want to fund this. It's just their underwriting is it's very rigorous, and they're right. They have a right, and they're correct in wanting to see that we have very good financial management back in place. So.
And just a reminder, the number of apartments at Red Clover 2?
18.
18.
And that's it.
And that's it, and we are going to enter executive session to discuss.
That means we gotta get out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen.
Karen, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had to run to the store,
I need a.
It was in the reformer. I'll make sure you get a copy of it.
Do I have a motion to
I'll
enter
make sure you get a copy.
Okay, thank you.
Thomas moving.
Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Second,
Thanks.
saying, all those in favor?
Bye. Yay.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be back for the second year to congratulate the finalists of the Phones Down, Heads Up PSA contest. It's encouraging to see so many young Vermonters getting involved and to raise awareness for such an important issue, which is distracted driving. I've said many times, I believe public safety is a primary function of any government. It rises to the top, and it's really our number one responsibility. And as governor, that responsibility starts with me, and I take it very seriously. Between 2013 to 2017, in Vermont alone, there were over 950 crashes caused by distracted driving. And nationwide, from 2012 to 2017, nearly 20,000 people died in crashes involving a distracted driver. The use of electronic devices is one of the most common reasons for distracted driving, and too many drivers are doing it. I see it on the road every day. Unfortunately, texting while driving continues to be a significant trend among many, but in particular, younger drivers. In fact, in 2017, 8% of 15 to 19-year-olds killed in crashes were caused by distracted driving. In Vermont, handheld use of electronic devices and texting while driving is illegal. Working to get drivers to act responsibly behind the wheel isn't easy, but we all have a responsibility to do our part and to call on others to do the same. That's why I want to thank all the students who got involved in the PSA event. We need as many tools in the toolbox as we can get to spread the word about the dangers of distracted driving. I appreciate you and your classmates for stepping up and sharing the message as many of you take to the road for the first time. I'd also like to thank the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance and VTrans, as well as the Department of Public Safety for their work to keep Vermonters safe. I look forward to awarding the finalists. And now, who's next?
Thank you. So again, I'd like to welcome you, like Governor Scott said, to the second annual 802 Phones Down, Heads Up PSA contest. It's really good to look out and see this growing with the attendance this year up over last year. The Vermont Highway Safety Alliance is a nonprofit organization dedicated to reducing crashes on Vermont's highway. I think to kick off the ceremony today, the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance would like to recognize a person who's been a vital member and an inspiration for his work of the media and marketing of the Alliance for many years. Ken Millman from Spike Advertising has been passionate and an invaluable contributor to the branding of the Alliance, setting up our website, social media, and creative as a participant and subject matter expert on our advisory council. In short, giving the Alliance a public face out there. He's a perfect example of someone who combines both professionalism and passion for what he does. Ken contacted the Alliance to help us put a public face on it. He's been committed to the Alliance and embraced and promoted ideas, worked on the PSA, the Roadkill series for us, and he's inspired the group to pursue countless other items while we've worked with him. I know working with him alone, it's been very exciting to have Ken on working with us and everything. The Alliance owes a great deal to Ken for his work and dedication, and it's in that honor, if you come up, Ken, we'd like to present you an award for excellence in media and marketing from the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance.
Thank you for those awfully kind words.
Good. All right. Well, we really like working with you. Thank you. So to talk a little bit more about the contest, the PSA Awards, the Public Safety Announcement Awards, students were asked to produce a 25-second video on the dangers of distracted driving. We know that young drivers aren't the only one that are texting and driving, but we think who better to produce a video that would actually appeal to their peers, the teens, than teens themselves. We launched the contest on January 6th, right after the first of the year. 6 sponsors agreed to donate some money to help fund the prizes. We'd like to thank some of them: Cooperative Insurance, AAA of New England, Yankee Driving School, the Consultant on Police Services, and Midstate Dodge. In total, 30 entries from Vermont and the region submitted. We had some extremely strong submissions, so it's really good to see in the second year that we're getting more students involved in this. 12 judges carefully reviewed all of these submissions, and we want to really thank them for their time. We've got a list up here on the screen of who helped us judge these. In the end, 12 of these videos really surfaced up at the top and were recognized as the finalists for some excellent work. I think what I would like to do is, and with the governor's help, start recognizing the finalists and move on through honorable mention and on to the actual winners. So for finalists, we'll be giving you a certificate recognizing the work you did, a $10 gift card to go out and grab some lunch with. So if you're here and you could come up and everything, because I haven't had a chance to meet all of you. Linda Ricard and Kaylee Bennett from Windsor High School. All right. Yeah, that's what I said. There's a few. Yeah, so why don't I call them all up then, so we'll go through that way. So Keelan Rooney from Hanover High School, C.J. McDermott and Aaron Trombley from Champlain Valley Union High School. Congratulations. We've got Maddie Miskinski and Sophia Howe from White River Valley High School. And Emily Calkins and Danny Collette with a VSP Explorer Post 446 from the Mount Anthony Union High School.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
I also want some really honorable mentions, a $25 gift card. Ian Goldberg from Woodstock High School. Michelle Townsend from Windsor High School. And Gregory Torbert from Northwest Technical Center. Come on up.
Congratulations. Thank you.
We also this year had the People's Choice Award. It's a special category given by the Youth Safety Council. If Jim's here, I think right behind me there. I think Jim, I'll let you do this one.
Thank you. Hello. On behalf of the Youth Safety Council of Vermont, and as a random Vermonter, I want to say thank you to Kaylee and to our other contestants and winners for reminding us all that we're a community that cares about one another and respects each other by having each other's backs and sharing messages like these videos. So I'm proud of the good energy that's gone into sharing this message. And Kaylee Green, are you here? Our award, the People's Choice Award, is going to Kaylee Green, who earned, come on over, almost 500 votes for her video. So this is truly a People's Choice Award. And I'm honored to present this to you, as well as a check for $500, surprise. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you sincerely.
So what I'd like to do is start now with third place. I'm sure you'll recognize your video. I'll read out the name, but you can start to come up and everything. So if we can roll the video for the third place, and we have Emily Gamau and Emma Newman from Hanover High School. In second place with a $500 award sponsored by Cooperative Insurance, if we can roll the video, we have Cole Klimowski and Liam Swan from Essex High School, if they're here. Good job, guys. And I guess what we've been waiting for in first place, a $750 award that's been sponsored by Midstate Dodge, the Vermont Highway Safety Alliance, and the Consultant on Police Services. If we can show Lawton Jones' video from Green Mountain Valley School.
A text or a life? Your choice. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank all the students that participated. We had a really great turnout this year, and hopefully this event will keep growing every year and everything. It's been exciting to see it grow over the first 2 years. So, again, I want to thank all the students, the judges, the sponsors, the committee, and everybody that helped put this together. I think what we'll do real quick, if we can, is maybe get a little area cleared out here, and we'll get a picture with
Yeah, we'll do right here in front of them.
yeah, with the award winners and everything. So, thank you, everybody.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Attorney General T.J. Donovan. I am joined by Jill Abrams from my office, as well as Rose Hayes, who's the investigator. Kate Van Hayes from Senator Bernie Sanders' office is here, as well as Bob Bick from the Howard Center. Bob, I want to thank you and your team for hosting this again here at the Howard Center to announce another lawsuit in our effort to address the opiate crisis in our state. Let me say this before I begin about the Howard Center. They have been on the front lines before anyone in addressing the opiate crisis in this state. They have expended significant resources in addressing the opiate crisis in this state. They have saved thousands of lives in this state. They were the first voices to call for treatment, to expand the hub and spoke model, to create the methadone clinic and open the doors to the methadone clinic, to argue and advocate for medically assisted to treatment, and to advocate for the dignity of all people, especially those who suffer with addiction. So Bob, I want to thank you and your team for all that you have done for this community, for those who have suffered from addiction, and for setting an example for fearless advocacy on this issue of the opiate epidemic in our state. So thank you. Today, I'm proud to announce that the state of Vermont is suing the Sackler family for deceptive acts, unfair and deceptive conduct, nuisance, and unjust enrichment for the role they played in promoting these deceptive acts to spread and sell OxyContin throughout our state. We filed a case against 8 individual members of the Sackler family who personally participated in and directed the misconduct of Purdue Pharma, the manufacturer of highly addictive OxyContin. As I said, we sued for unfair and deceptive conduct, nuisance, and unjust enrichment. These 8 members of the Sackler family, they served as officers or directors of Purdue between 1996 and 2018 and oversaw the deceptive marketing campaign that led to an explosion in opiate prescribing and the opiate crisis in Vermont. They made billions of dollars as a result of this. The Sackler family managed the company's core business activities, marketing, sales, and product development of opiates. They directed and authorized the company's deceptive strategy to minimize the health risk associated with opiates and deceptively claimed that prescription opiates were rarely the cause of death, of addiction, abuse, or misuse. The Sacklers directed and approved hiring sales representatives whose job was to visit doctors and persuade them to prescribe more opiates, higher doses of opiates, and for longer periods of time. They did this in Vermont. They also devised several additional unconscionable schemes to fortify their market. They directed sales representatives to expand the market to new and vulnerable populations, the elderly and the opioid naive, those who had not previously used these powerful drugs. They directed their sales representatives to promote an ever-increasing escalation of doses to increase sales of Purdue's more expensive products without adequately explaining that patients who use opiates become physically dependent on them and require higher doses to achieve the same level of pain relief, and that increased opiate doses carry higher health and addiction risks. And they directed sales representatives to promote and distribute opiate saving cards, which provided substantial price discounts for the express purpose of inducing patients to continue to use opiates long term. They received detailed briefings on the size, distribution, daily activities, and compensation of their opiates sales force. They were engaged in this deception on a daily basis. They were active participants in this deception that has devastated and impacted thousands of Vermonters' lives. The Sackler family members who we sue today and their positions are as follows. Richard Sackler, who was the board member from 1990 to 2018. He was the co-chair of the board in 2003 and remained co-chair until he left the board in 2018. He was Purdue's head of research and development from 1990 through 1999, and he was the president and CEO of Purdue from 1999 through 2003. Jonathan Sackler, he joined the board in 1990 and remained on the board until 2018. He was a vice president. Kathy Sackler, she was a board member from 1990 to 2018. She was a vice president. Eileen Sackler Lefcourt, board member from 1990 to 2018. Mortimer D.A. Sackler, he was a board member from 1993 to 2018. Teresa Sackler, a board member from 1993 to 2018. And David Sackler, a board member from 2012 to 2018. And finally, Beverly Sackler, who was a board member from 1993 to 2017. This is our third lawsuit that we've brought in the state of Vermont in regards to the opiate crisis in the state. As you know, we sued Purdue Pharma as a corporation. We sued as well as 2 other corporations. But I want to be clear about the Sacklers. They made billions of dollars off the backs of patients who became addicted to OxyContin. They made billions of dollars. The entire Sackler family has been unjustly enriched by their misdeeds, but our lawsuit only names the Sackler family board members who served on the board of directors between 1993 and 2017, because these 8 individuals that I previously named were officers or directors of Purdue Pharma during that relevant time period. The evidence shows that they were deeply involved in running the company. As one of Purdue's prior CEOs said, the board of directors in which these 8 Sackler family members were on functioned as the de facto CEO. That's why we sue the Sacklers today. With that, let me turn it over to Kate Van Haste from Senator Bernie Sanders' office, who is here to announce efforts by Senator Sanders and others in the United States Senate to address the opioid crisis.
Thanks very much. On behalf of Senator Sanders, thanks for having me here today. So first, let me just agree with the Attorney General. Bob, you and all of your staff at the Howard Center are doing tremendous work that is critically important to the welfare and the safety and the ability of Vermonters to thrive. And you guys have been really on the front of this effort, and we are where we are today, and we know what we know because of your work. And you have some phenomenal clients, and I think it's important to recognize them as well. These are wonderful members of our community, and you are helping them to thrive in our community. And so together, I think what we want to do is maybe give you a little less work to do, maybe have your team be able to focus on some of the other good work that needs to happen in this state. From Bernie's perspective, we have got to get out ahead of this crisis a little bit better. Congress has done a good job on a bipartisan effort to put some money into treatment. We have federal funding to provide treatment to folks, but that is not enough. We have to start looking at prevention efforts to make sure that more and more people don't become addicted to these powerful medications. Part of that effort is making sure that drug companies cannot market to these people and cannot participate in these illegal practices. So we really appreciate the work of the Attorney General and his office to highlight the role that individuals play in this problem, because from Senator Sanders' perspective, corporations can also often hide behind that corporate name, but we know that there are people making these decisions, and these people need to be held accountable for what they are doing to the rest of our country. So Senator Sanders today is going to be introducing legislation with Senator Bennett and others in the United States Senate titled the Opioid Crisis Accountability Act. And part of what that legislation does is to prohibit the illegal marketing and distribution practices that happen today that we're talking about. Right now, these drug companies bake in fines into their cost of doing business. They expect to get fined by the Justice Department. They consider it part of the cost of doing business. That has to stop. We have to make the repercussions of their illegal activities mean something. So we are also going to make them reimburse the federal government for the economic impact, the damage that they have caused. We spend billions and billions of dollars of federal funding every year cleaning up the mess that these companies cause, and we have to hold them accountable. Another thing we're going to do in this legislation that Senator Sanders is introducing today is to reduce the period of exclusivity that these brand companies have on their products. Right now, brand name manufactured drugs have an exclusive hold on the market from upwards of 7 years. We are going to say once and for all that if you participate in illegal practices, you are not going to have that close hold on the market any longer. You're going to lose that. And that is one thing that these drug companies are not prepared for. And finally, the legislation that Senator Sanders is introducing is going to put forward a penalty for the development of opioid medications that are developed with federal funding. Because right now, most of these drug companies use federal research dollars to come up with the research and development of these drugs. We need to say again that if you participate in these illegal activities, if you create drugs, lie about the impact on the American people, you're going to have to reimburse the federal government for the funding that was provided to you in taxpayer dollars. And you're also going to have to pay a fine. So the legislation imposes up to a 25% total amount on the profit from these drugs that those corporations will have to pay back to the federal taxpayer. So Senator Sanders is appreciative of the work that's happening right now to address this crisis, and we're happy to work together to make even more strides moving forward. So thanks very much for having me here today on behalf of Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Kate. Thank to Senator Sanders for his continued leadership on this issue. The two other corporations that we've sued are McKesson and Cardinal Health. Those lawsuits were filed in Chittenden County Superior Court, as this lawsuit will be as well, or was earlier this morning. I just want to make one last point about Bob Bick and the team at Howard. None of this work that we're doing in this state, whether it's the hub and spokes, whether it's the lawsuit, whether it's alternatives to the criminal justice system, whether it's addressing addiction as a disease, none of this would have happened but for the leadership of Howard, really being the moral voice on the dignity of each individual, those that suffer from addiction, that it is a disease. And that really created the environment, I think, in this state that has led Vermont to do more than most. We still have a long way to go, but a lot of the efforts that frankly is being emulated in other states, it started here with the leadership from the folks at Howard. So thank you. With that, happy to take questions.
How much are you seeking in this lawsuit?
You know, there's never a specific dollar amount that we would ask, but as we talked about the Sackler family being unjustly enriched across this nation, including Vermont, they made billions of dollars, and we're looking to disgorge that money as a result of that unjust enrichment.
Is there any update on the other litigation that's going on?
Well, in the lawsuit that we brought against Purdue Pharma, which was our first lawsuit, they filed a motion to dismiss. We were successful, we won that. With that, let me though turn it over to Jill Abrams, who has done a tremendous job from my office in being the lead attorney on these lawsuits, to give you an update in terms of what's happening here in Vermont. But as you all know as well, there is a multi-state investigation which Vermont is playing a leadership role in. So, Jill.
So in the Purdue lawsuit, we're in the stage called discovery. So we and Purdue will exchange documents. There will be depositions, and we'll proceed towards trial. So that process is ongoing. And with respect to the McKesson and Cardinal lawsuit, because that one is recently filed, we're just starting. We expect to see motions to dismiss, which we feel pretty confident we'll win.
Do you expect to see any further suits down the line from any, or is this maybe the last?
We're keeping our options open.
Okay, thank you.
So this lawsuit, TJ, this lawsuit is directed at individuals, which is individuals different. I mean, the previous two are at companies.
Yes.
And you're already suing Purdue Pharma.
Yes.
I mean, why are you going after individuals?
Because the Sacklers, as I said, directed the company in their capacity as board members. They acted as the de facto CEO and directed not only the deceptive marketing, but the deployment of sales forces into the state of Vermont to deceive Vermonters that these drugs were not as harmful, were not as addictive, would not cause death, when in fact they did. That's the deception. Why? And they directed the company. That's why we sue them today in their capacity as board members in the state of Vermont, the 8 of them. And when we talk about unjust enrichment, they made billions of dollars here. Vermonters have died. We know stories, not only of those who have lost their lives, but folks who are fighting every single day to regain not only their sobriety, but their dignity and their way in life as a result of this addiction that started, frankly, from these prescription drugs. It was a prescription drug crisis in this state before it was a heroin crisis, before it was a fentanyl crisis. It was a prescription drug crisis in this state, which was OxyContin, which is manufactured by Purdue Pharma, which was directed by the Sackler family.
TJ, for those of us who aren't, legal experts by any means, when you sue the company, Purdue Pharma,
Yep.
aren't you technically suing the board? So where's the difference
Sure.
really between the two, between the one that you sued now and the Purdue Pharma? Aren't they kind of intertwined?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm having Jill answer that question. As you asked for the legal expert. Here's the legal expert.
They are intertwined. One is a corporate entity and the other is individual, so it gives us multiple places to go for money. So with respect to both, we're suing for unfair and deceptive acts and practices, and for nuisance with respect to the Sacklers for unjust enrichment. So it's a way essentially to reach into the pocket of the individual wrongdoer. So if one of those individuals, say, made $1 billion in a given year, we would have access to that $1 billion individually, separate and apart from what the company as a separate corporate legal entity would contribute to a lawsuit.
Now, would the company and the individuals, even though they're separate lawsuits, could they have the same sort of defense, or do you anticipate different defense?
They may. We'll see pretty soon, I think.
Kind of following up on that, when you will bring the first lawsuit against the company, do you consider also bringing these individual lawsuits at that time? Do you have these people in individual capacity? And if not, I guess did anything change to bring you here today?
Sure. So we set our sights on doing the investigation of the corporation first. When you do an investigation like this, especially one that is over a lot of years and is pretty complex, you're literally looking at millions of pages of documents. And so it was really important for us to get the first lawsuit filed and be able to continue our investigation against the individual. So we felt that we were at the right place now, having reviewed the documents carefully to name the individuals as well.
I want to add one point to that, and which has been reported about Purdue Pharma as the corporate entity filing for bankruptcy. I won't offer an opinion whether they do that or not, but by suing the Sacklers separately, we'll be able to keep pressure on the most culpable family members, even if the filing in bankruptcy court should come from Purdue as a corporation.
A number of the lawsuits that have been filed in the opioid crisis by states are multiple state. Is the lawsuit that you filed today against the Sacklers only Vermont, or do you have other states?
No, it's just Vermont. The state of Vermont filing suit against these 8 Sacklers, and it was just the state of Vermont suing Purdue and McKesson and Cardinal Health. As we said earlier, we are part of the multi-state investigation with 40 some odd other states looking at the distributors and the manufacturers.
So if another state said, we agree with you regarding the Sacklers, could they join you on the lawsuit?
They would have to, and they have, other states have sued some Sackler family members. I know Massachusetts has, for an example. But, it's based on the facts in each individual case and the issue of jurisdiction.
Now, if it's already been said in other press conferences, I apologize, but
it probably has.
I'm sorry. Where is the money going to go if hypothetically you were to win these suits? Where do you think it would go? Would it maybe go to the Howard Center, or?
I'd probably get in trouble for this, but let me say it anyways. And this is, I don't want to talk specific about this lawsuit or any lawsuit. I think if there is a recovery, the people that have been on the front lines, like Howard, need to be, I think the funds need to be directed towards the folks that are out in the community, helping people every single day, saving people's lives, getting people healthy, getting people back on the road to recovery. It's not just addiction, it's mental health too. And I'd like to see the money directed towards organizations like Howard. I'd like to see the money directed towards prevention, towards treatment, towards intervention. We're not, as has been stated often, we're not going to arrest our way out of this issue. This is a public health issue. It is not a public safety issue by itself. because of it's a public health crisis, there are public safety consequences, but at its core, this is a public health issue, and it should be directed to public health organizations like the Howard Center. Bob, I don't know if you want to offer a few words on that. Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, Howard Center is always pleased to receive funding to support the work that we do. If in fact there's a recovery, then I would imagine that those dollars, were they to come to Howard Center and other treatment providers throughout the state, it would relieve pressure on the state's general fund, and then those dollars could be used for other social programs to meet needs of other communities.
Could you give us just a sense of how things are going? I don't know, Bob or TJ, you know, how are things going in terms of our efforts to reduce fatalities, overdoses? I know Chittenden County has made some progress. I wondered if you could just advance the conversation a little bit.
Right, the difficulty is when we look at the data, we're looking at moments in time. Right now, I think we are making significant progress. I think it's fair to say that we're not seeing a huge increase in the number of new individuals that are struggling with an opioid use problem. But we still have a very significant number of individuals in this state who are actively using and will ultimately need to enter into the treatment system over time.
Why do you think that's the case?
That there is still a significant number of individuals?
That we haven't seen an increase in the number of people. Is it education that the general public is picking up on? Is it the doctors that are no longer prescribing opioids? Why are we not, why is that increase diminishing?
Yeah, I think that's a complex, it's a complex answer. I think there are multiple factors. Certainly, I think the outreach and education efforts have had an impact. The awareness of the issue is certainly a factor. The actions that the state has taken with regard to the prescription monitoring system and the changes in prescription prescribing practices have really, for the most part, taken prescription opioids off the table. So now we're dealing with the consequences of that, as TJ had alluded to. But, there's no magic bullet. I think one of the things that we all recognize, for those of us that have been doing this for a long time, is that substance use and abuse patterns run in cycles, and that for a period of time, depressant type drugs tend to be predominant, and then they cycle, and stimulant drugs like methamphetamine and cocaine become more dominant, and they kind of cycle on a sine wave that opposes each other. And we are seeing, as the state has indicated, some data to suggest an increase in stimulant abuse, like cocaine and methamphetamine, not just nationally, but here in Vermont. The most disturbing aspect of that is that those drugs are now also involve fentanyl. So it still raises the untoward outcome of sudden death.
This is probably a question for Jill. How long has this investigation been going on?
Over 2 years.
And how long do you think it will take for it to work through the courts, either to a settlement or to a jury?
Well, in the Purdue case, we just submitted and the judge approved an order which sets out what's going to happen each step along the way in our case against Purdue, and we have a trial date in 2021, first half of 2021. So there'll be lots of steps between now and then, and with the other two cases, we don't have a schedule yet, but it probably won't be super different.
Are you having talks of a settlement though? I'm trying to think the last time we had a press conference like this, there was the Oklahoma had just settled with Purdue, so how close?
I mean, what I would say is that conversations are happening. And that's what I would say.
Can you be a little more specific? Can you a little bit more word?
No, just conversations are happening. I would just say to follow up on Bob's point, we've done a lot of good things as a state to address this issue. But last week, I met with a family who lost a daughter to an overdose, fentanyl. And that's our challenge. Until no one else dies. No one else gets started. That's our challenge. That may be an impossible goal, but that's our goal. And we should do everything we possibly can to help those who are struggling with this addiction, which is a devastating, powerful addiction. And we should do everything we can to prevent anybody from getting started. And that's, that's gonna take money. Let's be honest about that. That's gonna take money. And if we can't get it from the state has done, we've done good. We gotta look for other sources. And then the question is, where does that money go? Where do we get our most bang for our buck? And so when we talk about these issues, I think we could be talking about the full landscape here, in terms of prevention, in terms of treatment, acknowledging the work we've done as a state, acknowledging the work that the Howard Center has done. But to those parents who I met last week, their daughter's never coming back. And this was somebody who started with prescription drugs, transitioned to heroin, and who died as a result of a fentanyl overdose in our state. So this challenge is real. This challenge is ongoing. And for me, this is our priority. Because we can do better.
The lawsuit today, the court filing was in
Yes.
Superior?
Yes. As are the other lawsuits.
And is it structured the same way the other two, where you have the outside law firm?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Same law firm.
Same law firm.
If there is a settlement, would it be based on per capita use or sales? Would some of those Vermont trends be incorporated?
We're having those conversations.
Off topic?
Sure.
We've got the state legislature looking towards adjournment. There's been a couple of bills that have caught people's attention, the gun bill and the abortion bill in particular. Do you anticipate any court challenges to those bills?
I support both those bills. I hope the governor signs both of them. Yes, I think given the legal challenge to the gun bill from last year, I would anticipate another legal challenge as to the abortion bill, which I support. I would anticipate a legal challenge, and we will vigorously defend both those bills should they become law.
Well, with the abortion bill, you already got abortion in statute. I mean, what would a lawsuit mean?
My father used to say, you can never prevent a lawsuit. You can prevent a good lawsuit, though. So we'll see what happens.
On the Douglas Field one case in Burlington, has the office received the results of the investigation from the
Yes.
police, and what's the status of any timeline idea on when?
No timeline. We have the investigation and we're reviewing it. Thank you for coming. Thank you to Howard Center. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Of course, I'm sure most people know me. I'm Christine Hultquist. I was the Democratic candidate for governor this last session, this last election period. And I'm here today to really talk about some disappointment I have. And I'm going to say, first I'm going to frame that with the fact that I think the legislature is doing as good a job as possible within the parameters that they're stuck with. But this is really a message to Vermont. And it really starts with the issue of the minimum wage. You know, I spoke to a building conference this morning, and I showed a bunch of charts. The charts show that median family income hasn't gone up since the early 80s, yet the cost of housing has gone up dramatically. So we're in this situation where we're continuing to see this massive transfer of wealth, which of course for construction folks, building folks, that means their market for big homes goes down. And they got to think about how are we going to, our next generation that has no money because they're getting paid so poorly, they're so saddled with college debt. And this is a reflection on our values as a state. And I'm highly disappointed because the idea that we're going to lose jobs when we've got the lowest unemployment rate in history, 2.2%, and we're still arguing about what it's going to do to jobs. I'm highly disappointed. And if you look at the legislature, they've got to make those tough decisions. And I know I don't have to make those tough decisions, where the money's going to be spent. But certainly when it comes to minimum wage, this is a case of where we're putting our values. So I call on Vermonters to think about rural Vermont, where I spend all my time, and where 50% of the people are just struggling to make ends meet. Creating a living wage should be our goal. It should be a long-term goal. And that's where I'm going to get to my criticism of the governor about we need leadership here. We need leadership. We need a long-term vision that's going to help get Vermont out of where we are today. Of course, the legislature every year has to fight and battle for every nickel and dime and where it has to go. And they do a good job with what they've got. But I expect a leader to build a long-term plan to get us out of here. And I call on the governor to get your butt out of Montpelier, get down to Washington, and get $200 million of that $20 billion in broadband funding that's made available. And of course, the governor's going to say to me, I'm sure, is that, oh, that's for 5G networks. No, you're not at the table. Go down there and fight our case. 5G isn't going to work in Vermont. We got to get fiber to every home. We rightfully should get $200 million of that $2 billion money. You got to be at the table in order to be able to get some of the benefits. So, and oh, by the way, Governor, go speak with Ron DeSantis in Arkansas, the governor of Arkansas. He's a Republican, and Arkansas is doing an absolutely phenomenal job, better than any other state in the nation in getting broadband out. So please, go down and talk to Rob DeSantis and do a good study what they're doing. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. You have rocket scientists working for you. But you as a leader speak with your feet. And your feet aren't speaking right now in terms of long-term economic development. And then I'm going to move to climate change. We are in a serious situation. I tell people that if you don't believe in climate change, I promise you will in the next 10 years. Misery is the greatest predictor of change. I recognize that the Governor's Accord, 19 governors have signed on to solve climate change, and they're majority Democrats. But go meet with that Governor's Accord and sign up Vermont. I know we're 0.2% of the national population. At the same time, we're a small state. As a governor, you got 626,000 people. You don't have the millions of people in the other state. So you got time. You got time to get out there. You got time to speak with these other states that are working on climate change. We can pull together and solve this issue. It's clear to me, I'll talk about our infrastructure costs. 2 weeks ago, I was down, I met with Gene Dodaro. He's the U.S. Comptroller. The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, their top concern, and they're the people that run the numbers, this isn't a political office, their top concern is what the cost of climate change is doing to us today already. FEMA's going to run out of money. Our storm costs have increased 5-fold since 2007. And let me tell you something else. We've got a $22 trillion deficit, and that works out to $450,000 for every man, woman, and children. So I'm a little ashamed of my generation. We've lived off the great work of our parents. We spend half the money our parents did in terms of gross domestic dollar on infrastructure, and we kick our problems down the road, whether it's financial or whether it's climate change. And we need a leader, and I call on Governor Scott to be that leader, to get out of Montpelier, go talk about what the best practices are and bring them back to Vermont. Please, become a leader. Don't be spending your time fighting with these smart folks in the legislature who know how to manage every dollar. That's not your job. Your job is to provide a future for us, and I'm asking you to do that. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Jubilee.
Hi, I'm Jubilee McGill. I'm a member leader of the Rights and Democracy Vermont, and I'm on their statewide leadership committee. I'm also the senior property manager for the Addison County Community Trust, the nonprofit affordable housing trust in my county. Fueled by my own experience living in poverty and bearing witness to the experiences of my tenants, I have committed much of my free time over the past 2 years to Rights and Democracy's Raise Up Vermont campaign, to ensure that our state's most vulnerable citizens are on a solid path to making a fair, livable wage, and that they have access to a paid family and medical leave insurance program that would benefit every working Vermonter during their lifetime. Far too often, workers across the state are forced to choose between keeping their jobs and taking care of themselves or providing care to a loved one. I see this frequently in my work as a housing manager, and it is a huge barrier that only works to keep people in poverty. I am disappointed that medical leave was cut out of this bill, and I implore our legislators to restore at least a few weeks of medical time to the bill so that we can more easily build on that in future sessions. I also call upon our legislators to come together to pass a strong minimum wage bill. Working so hard to barely meet your basic needs causes an extreme amount of stress. There are no good outcomes when one endures this type of stress long term. It can cause complete mental anguish. Some are tempted to commit crimes to survive. Others seek solace or refuge, even if only fleeting, in life-destroying substances. The effects ricochet throughout our community and have lasting effects on all of our lives. We need to look past the short-term costs of these types of bills and recognize all the long-term gains that will make possible for our citizens and our futures. Last summer and fall, Democrats, progressives, and independents across the entire state united. We came together and we made phone calls, we knocked on doors, we donated money, all because we were sold a vision of a veto-proof majority. And that this veto-proof majority would allow us to finally get these and many other great bills passed. And I know many of these same people join me in feeling disillusioned at the end of this legislative session. We allowed ourselves on being a citizens' legislature, a representative government, and I'm sure there are a few groups in Vermont feeling very represented right now. But for me, and many like me, this session has highlighted the crucial need for all citizens to be represented and reflected in our government. You'll hear more about this later, but this is why Brenda Siegel and I have co-founded All of Us, an organization to really examine how we define leadership in this state and how to help low-income Vermonters run for office. This legislative session has made it quite clear that we need more diverse voices at the table, and our hope is to create a government that is reflective of all of our people. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Tanya Vyhovsky, former candidate for state rep in Chittenden 8-1, and she is also a wonderful Rights and Democracy leader.
Thank you, Jubilee. I'm Tanya Vyhovsky, and as Jubilee said, I did run for office. I'm also the vice president of the Vermont board of the National Association of Social Workers, and I see these struggles in my office every day. I ran for office because of that, because too many Vermonters have been struggling for far too long with low wages and an astronomically high cost of living. When I ran, I met people faced with this struggle every day who were wondering what to do. Too many people here cannot afford to live. I grew up in a working-class single-parent household, and we struggled. My mother did her best to hide those struggles, and I still knew. I knew she couldn't always afford the things that we needed. Not because she wasn't working hard, but because the system was rigged against her. She worked all of the time, leaving us kids to fend for ourselves, and I too have struggled in low-wage jobs. Even in the jobs where I've earned a reasonable living wage, I've not always been able to make ends meet. Christine spoke of tough choices. I've had to make difficult choices, like choosing between rent and needed health care, because I couldn't possibly afford both. We cannot keep asking people to choose between needed medical care and homelessness. We cannot keep asking people to choose between caring for their families and holding down a job. This is unacceptable. Low wages hurt the majority of people, and we have to stop letting our economy operate at the expense of the people and climate. I know for many of the legislators that are discussing minimum wage and other economic justice bills like paid family leave and universal health care, that these conversations have become purely intellectual. They are voting to raise wages more slowly and seem not to realize that while they ask us to wait yet again, people are suffering and dying. We see you caving to the pressures of the voices backed by money and lobbyists. It's time for regular people to have the same representation as those with the money. If we have to get loud, we will, because we don't have a lobbyist. We can't afford one. People are struggling with the stress of not knowing if they can afford their daily expenses, where their next meal will come from, or whether our climate will support life in the next 10 years. Those struggles are overwhelming, and they damage our mental and physical health. We should all know of the long-term damages of this kind of toxic stress. This is what I work with every day. When we talk about raising the wage, we need to think about every child who is being raised in poverty, every mother who is stressed about whether she can feed her baby, every pregnant person who is delivering toxic doses of stress to their unborn child, every college student wondering if they can make it through the semester or if they need to work more to afford housing and food. I agree, the issue is complicated. That child in poverty is the same child we spend huge amounts of money on in our school systems because they're too hungry and stressed to learn or be attentive in the classroom. That pregnant person is the same person showing up in our emergency department with high blood pressure, little prenatal care, and astronomical healthcare expenses because she can't afford or access preventive care. And these families are suffering and dying young.